Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Porthole to Justice, the window to the truth. This is part 2. I am your host, Amelia Duran, and I'm live with David from Vietnam. David, welcome to the podcast.
How is everyone doing? Good, I hope.
Thank you. Despite technical difficulties, something that is not new to our podcast, right?
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. You know, I mean, I'm pretty patient with it, but whatever.
Yeah.
So how is everybody? Good. I hope you're well.
Awesome. I was just playing a little recap of some research that I was doing about, I think I spoke to you a little bit about it earlier today, just some of the I don't know, there's the fraud with Lady Gaga, the Who, threatening to disappear people for questioning them about, medicinal treatments rather than the vaccine that they're trying to push on the people. And then, there's the fraud that's going on, is the money laundering, as well as Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who sent $500 million to China. When China has been sending us contaminated products in the first place, masks.
On purpose. On purpose.
Supplies. Go ahead.
No, they've been doing it on purpose. Like, there's no confusion about it. You know what I mean? Like, there is no confusion about it. They know exactly what they're doing. And, it's almost, the level of complacency is almost criminal within itself. But I also recognize that the vast majority of people, they're just not mentally qualified to deal with what the real reality is right now. Like, we're actively in World War III, and you have to be completely comatose or catatonic or just, your average, socially and chemically lobotomized, type of person. And that's a lot of what we're dealing or seeing right now. I'm even seeing those people. I said those people. Yes, I did. I'm even seeing those kinds of people, in Vietnam. And it's interesting to me to have to see them here, because I'm just like, man, don't you have something else to do right now? And there's only so much you can do. There's only so much I can do. And other than that, I just pretty much mind my own business. I'm just like, it's not even worth talking to people, because
I think where I want to start is, David, you were in China when the outbreak was actually occurring, and you don't have to recap that or go over it again, but we were hosting podcasts during the outbreak in Wuhan, and I was posting on my Facebook and in Social Media News Network about the psychological warfare. And
it's getting, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off, but it is getting to new levels every day. It's not exponentially increasing, but it's definitely incrementally increasing where you can notice it. Like, I don't know, you'd have to be, I don't know what you'd have to do to not notice it. I'm sorry, but please continue. I cut you off. I'm sorry about that.
Well, the reason why I mentioned it is because, almost immediately, I knew that they were, that they were paying, not just, I assume mainstream media is involved, right? Because China is a major holder in a lot of our mainstream media. And I kind of expected that, but I was also surprised to see all of the sudden, all of these, big brainy certified specialists online on my timeline, posting.
Please show me your diploma. Please show me your medical license. Please show me your certificates. Please show me your credentials. I mean, that's really all. That's where we are right now. It's just ask these people who they are and, what legitimate claim to. Here's the thing we have to understand. Does everybody remember? And this is funny because no one talks about it now. Nobody talks about it. Does everybody remember when, the God, what is it called? When the little, there's a word for it. Give me a second. When the volcano in Hawaii went critical. Does everybody remember that? Remember when that happened?
Vaguely. I'm trying to think. What was the name of that?
Listen, this is what I'll tell you. It was the equivalent of a person. If Hawaii was a person's face, it would mean that your nose started melting from the inside out and your face was collapsed in slowly. That's what Hawaii was doing. While some of it's leaking out of your mouth and your ears, and your tear ducts. That's basically what's going on in Hawaii. But I say this just to say that when that was all happening, one of the major things that you can, walk away with from that whole experience was that Hawaii was inundated with people trying to demonstrate some form of authority.
Well, yeah, I think there's
but that's what I'm saying is that in this situation, that's what we're seeing is them trying to hire. So basically, everyone who's popping up as some sort of peculiar authority right now is basically, I'll say it, they're a Chicom agent. They're basically someone who's being paid by China to come out on national television in America and tell you some sort of fake story about what's real and what's not. And the worst part about it is you haven't figured out.
Let's loosely touch on the fake narrative. Okay, we know the WHO originally lied. Their original narrative was a lie to the American people. And that the WHO is actively waging psychological warfare. But let's just touch on the fake narrative.
And biological warfare. Time's out. And biological warfare, because they're sending faulty, contaminated test kits separate from the Chinese ones. And the CDC is right there with them. Meanwhile, everyone's trying to paint this narrative like Dr. Fauci is like a C. Everett Koop. You know what I mean? They're trying to convince you that Dr. Fauci is a C. Everett Koop, and nothing could be worse. Nothing could be worse. Like, dude, you're nowhere near a C. Everett Koop. Anyway, I'm sorry, but the false narrative and all these fake. There's a ton of fake doctors. There is a ton of fake doctors. Anyone on television right now. Even if they graduated medical school, they are a fake doctor. They're just, let me put it this way. They are just vaccine dealers. They're just vaccine dealers.
Fake doctors. They're fake doctors online. Okay, they're not fake doctors. They're probably real doctors, and they probably have real certification. However, they've been compromised. I have reason to suspect, David. I have reason to suspect that the hospitals are complicit as well because there's rumors of assisted suicide.
Listen. Let me give you the numbers, and no one's looking at this. People are getting anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 per body that they claim just so happen to die from COVID-19. So you get in a car crash, you get to the hospital, you're not dead yet. They classify you on the record as someone who died. So all these numbers that we're getting from COVID-19, let me put it this way. Here's something to think about. America has what? 300,000 to, 300 million to 400 million people living in it. And we have these numbers and China doesn't. Here's the thing. China's technically China's only a first world country in certain areas. In its major cities. And the same could be said about the Western world in general, depending on where you go. But the point I'm getting at is that our numbers are 80 to 90% people who have died from other comorbidities or other, like prime example, where'd all the heart attacks go? Where'd all the strokes go? They're classifying them as COVID-19 victims or people who died from it, and they're trying to say that. So our numbers are totally fake, ballooned, and ridiculous. Trust me. Let me say this: if those were the actual numbers in America from people that died from it, we'd have easily 10 million cases.
So I just want to point out something else. You know, the United States may be number one for human trafficking worldwide, but China is known worldwide for organ harvesting as well.
Well, I'm going to say this. I think that China is actually the major hub for human trafficking. I just think that they, unlike America, are at the. Let me put it this way: they're completely complicit at the state level in such a way where how do you separate organ trafficking and human trafficking? How do you separate them? Forcing someone, you know. I mean, I'm not reaching. I'm just making a statement in regards to this is a fact. If you're kidnapping people off the street for not breaking the law, and the only thing they're doing is, you know, managing their health, whether you're Falun Dafa or Falun Gong, and that's a whole other subject, and you're stealing their organs, what's the difference between kidnapping a child off the street to, you know, sexually rape and violate them while simultaneously, you know, harvesting their organs and or their, you know, bodily fluids? Like, what's the difference? What's the difference at that level when you look at that in a population of 1.4 billion people, and it's not 1.8, 1.4 billion people, and now they're admitting to that because of the situation, right? They're trying to downplay their numbers. But in a situation like that, you have to recognize that China is actually the global capital of human trafficking. Listen, this is one of the issues that, let me explain this to you, and no one really talks about this. One of the biggest issues that's coming out from all of the other Southeast Asian countries is the fact that China on a regular basis is buying kidnapped women and young girls, and also young boys, but mostly women and young girls from places. They're buying through, you know, human trafficking rings that they set up. And that's going to be listen to this, one of the major things that's going to completely decouple all of Southeast Asia, all the other countries in Southeast Asia from China, is when it comes out that almost 70 to 90% of human trafficking, I'm saying these numbers again, go look it up. 70 to 90% of all human trafficking that happens in Southeast Asia has a direct correlation to the Chinese Communist Party totally state sponsoring it for the purposes, get this, for the purposes of compensating for their lack of growth rate in order to project themselves further into their 100-year plan. And that's their whole psychology. Like,
you know,
it's ridiculous.
It's
so you
wild.
Have women from every Southeast Asian, almost every Southeast Asian company being kidnapped and trafficked into China to become a slave wife.
Wow.
For breeding purposes. Because they committed infanticide for so long. Like, here's one of the major problems that's happening in China that no one talks about, is that their entire culture of infanticide towards female children being born has, and then the one-child policy, which further projected it into the modern age, has finally caught up with them, where the demographic is something like the real demographic, not the one they keep trying to show people now, because they've changed the demographic like 4 times within the last 8 or 10 months, where the actual number is just like 60 dudes in China for every one woman. 40 to 60 dudes. And when you have a country where women are like, I got options, or not even, I got options, like they're romantically, they've been romantically seduced by the Western standard of what romance and marriage should be. And a lot of, women in China are like, I'm not messing with that. Like, I mean, it's a regular thing to see people who are, mixed couples getting assaulted or harassed in China, where, Chinese nationalists are running around in the streets saying, we don't want you with our women. And then they try to gang up with other nationalists. It's crazy. But the major thing that's going to create the largest,
I also want to talk about, if I can just interject, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I apologize, because that's interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
But I also want to talk about the rise of non-governmental, movements, in our society here in the Western world, that's a thing, that have been gang stalking and targeting for human trafficking as well. that has been on the rise.